Hello everyone, Ryan here. So, I read Highly Logical Behavior by John Corey Whaley. Read this last month, back in September. Took me a while to get around to reviewing it, but I was finally able to sit down and just talk about it, so that's what I'm going to do. Of course, the main character is Solomon Reed, and I guess for the most part, he's kind of like a typical teenager, but also kind of not. Main factor being, of course, that he suffers from agoraphobia and also severe anxiety. Pretty much, I guess, the story starts where it details the fact that at one point when he was still in junior high, I believe 8th grade, he had this sudden, like, really strong panic attack, or I guess anxiety attack. And he took off his clothes and he just, like, he went into the fountain that was at the front of the school. And, of course, all his peers immediately laughed at him, ridiculed him. Of course, he was eventually pulled out by, I don't know who, principal or someone who was a part of the staff. And so after that, he went home, and then pretty much ever since then, he stayed home, ended up being homeschooled. And he pretty much spends his time, I want to say 3 years, or maybe a little over 3 years inside his home, inside his room. And of course, being homeschooled, studying a lot, and actually doing a lot of extra work, more so than your average student. And then one day, this girl by the name of Lisa Prater, she, of course, is applying to different colleges, and I guess this is during her senior year, and what would have also been Solomon's senior year in high school, had he stayed in public school. But Lisa, because she starts applying to all these different colleges, there's one college in particular she wants to go to, but she has to write an essay, and it has to have something to do with what she plans on majoring in, and I guess she plans on majoring in something to do with psychology, behavioral psychology, or something like that. And then all of a sudden, she starts remembering back in 8th grade, Solomon Reed, when he had this weird, anxiety attack, and she began to wonder, what happened to him, because after that day, she didn't see him around anymore, nor did anybody else. But I guess she was I guess one of the first students to see him that day, and not only that, but remember seeing him that day for quite some time, till eventually she just forgot, until she had to write this essay. So she decides that she's going to befriend Solomon in an effort to see if she can, I guess, not only figure out what happened to him. Well, first, of course, she figures out what happened to him. She, of course, Googles his name. She finds out that his mom works at some nearby dentist office. So she goes, visits his mom, gets a regular cleaning, and she sees that his mom has a picture of Solomon in her office somewhere, and she strikes up a conversation with her, and then she asks, she says, "Oh, I think your son went to the same school I did back in 8th grade, and I remember the last time I saw him, it looked like he had this weird panic attack or something, and and then she's kind of quickly asks, how is he doing? And then from there, Solomon's mom tells her, he's been homeschooled since then and hasn't really left the house much and all that. And then after that, Lisa just goes home, and then she writes out this letter, and that way she writes a letter to Solomon telling him that, that she actually cares about him, like more like, I guess, which is kind of weird because, she extends this offer, essentially she extends an offer of friendship to him in this letter. And I think like a couple days later, she goes back to the same dentist office, gives it to Solomon's mom so that she can give to him. Of course, Solomon's mom, she's surprisingly open to it. I mean, I guess for the most part, because, she's a concerned mom, and she doesn't like the fact that her son's been living like a somewhat hermetic lifestyle for the past 3 years or so. So, and then later that evening, his mom, Solomon's mom, gives him the letter, and then he reads it. And then pretty much from there, he contacts Lisa, and they strike up a friendship. She comes over, and then she really finds out why he's been staying home. She discovers that he's, suffering from agoraphobia. And at the same time, he has these really strong anxiety attacks. And pretty much the rest of the story is just them hanging out and whatnot. And she learns more about him. Of course, she never lets on, what her original intent for reaching out to him was. But she learns a lot more about him. She finds out that he's a huge fan of sci-fi stuff, science fiction stuff, most notably Star Trek, all things Star Trek. In fact, in the garage, I guess Solomon's parents agreed to allow him to paint the entire garage black, and then use this like yellow tape to section off different parts of the garage, all in an effort to make it look exactly like what's referred to as a hollow deck. Of course, in Star Trek, I'm not so sure in the original series, but in Star Trek Next Generation, they have this thing called a hollow deck, which is just like this one like floor, I guess, this area where people can go in and they can experience different things, and it feels real, except it's nothing but a hologram. Like, they can go on vacation or, go exploring different planets or train for battle against different holograms. So that's what Solomon had in mind when he painted the garage black. And of course, he shows it to Lisa the first day that she comes over to hang out with him. And of course, she doesn't really understand it because she's not, first of all, she's not a fan of science fiction or Star Trek. So, but then she remembers that her boyfriend, this guy named Clark, is in fact a big fan of Star Trek and science fiction stuff. And so she mentions him to Solomon, and then, eventually Clark comes over, Lisa's boyfriend Clark comes over, and then both Lisa and Clark start hanging out with Solomon on a regular basis. And that's pretty much how the bulk of the story is. Then eventually, Solomon, he decides that he wants to start swimming, or I guess before he, became this shut-in or recluse, he really liked just hanging out in a swimming pool, just swimming around. And he's able to convince his parents to allow him to have a swimming pool built in the backyard. And of course, with the help of his grandmother helps pay for it too. And they agree to it. And so then eventually, slowly but surely, Solomon works his way up to stepping out into the backyard and eventually once the pool is ready, getting into the pool, swimming around with Lisa and Clark, hanging out, having fun. And then, of course, also, too, at the same time, I should mention that around this time, or in fact, sometime before, like, he gets the pool built and all that, he comes out to Lisa, he tells her, admits that he's gay, and which was a hard thing for him, because he actually comes out to Lisa before he does to his parents. But eventually he does, and his parents, they don't really, they take it very well, and I guess better than Solomon had expected. And then later on, towards the latter half of the book, Lisa, because her boyfriend Clark starts hanging out with Solomon a lot more, mostly because they have a lot in common. They like talking about Star Trek and other science fiction stuff, and also just hanging out in the pool. But because of this, Lisa starts to think that her boyfriend is also gay, and that he has a crush on Solomon, or vice versa. Of course, inevitably, she does find out that Solomon does have a crush on Clark, but also, too, Clark does admit that, he has no feelings for Solomon whatsoever, though he does think he's a really cool person. He likes hanging out with him. He likes talking about Star Trek and other stuff. So, overall, I don't want to give away any more details than that, but I will say that the ending is pretty interesting. I kind of expected it to end a different way. Because ultimately, it's kind of like it leads you to believe that Solomon eventually does kind of overcome his agoraphobia, but I guess not to the extent that it's no longer an issue for him. Kind of like, I guess. Well, I guess it pretty much, the ending leaves a lot of things open for interpretation. And I don't know. I guess ultimately I like that this is something different for me. Like, I think so, because it is technically a YA novel, but I like that, it has this whole aspect of the main character, Solomon, who, because he's, this because he suffers from agoraphobia, yeah, that sucks, but at the same time, it also, I guess, it makes him somewhat more wise than your typical teenager. In some ways, in a lot of ways, not in every way, but I don't know, that's the way that I felt, that's the way that I interpreted the character of Solomon. Of course, and the character of Lisa, I did feel like it sucked that, because ultimately she was using Solomon. That was her main objective. That was this agenda that she had. And ultimately she does end up, well, I don't want to give away too much, but yeah, I don't know. I guess you could say I did like this book. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Again, I did feel like I thought the ending would have been a little more detailed, but overall it was okay. It's definitely a good read. And I also like the Star Trek aspect of it. Also the fact that, there's a lot of mentions of particular Star Trek episodes too, which I actually remember. I don't even consider myself to be that big of a Star Trek fan, but yeah, I was surprised that I actually knew what they were talking about, like when Solomon mentioned particular episodes of Star Trek. And so that was pretty cool for me. That brought back some memories for me, when I was a kid and I would watch a lot of old episodes of Star Trek. So yeah, ultimately I give it 4 out of 5 stars. And I recommend reading this, especially if you want to read a YA novel that is not like your typical YA novel. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It's again, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. So that'll do it for my review of Highly Illogical Behavior by John Corey Whaley. And thanks for watching. As always, till next time, don't forget, keep it real, keep on rocking, and peace.